Are you feeling like you're burning your reserves? You're past your reserves? You're starting to curl at the edges? There's a word that's used in our scriptures today that I was reminded of. When we're not connected to the vine, it says that it withers, that we can wither. We are called to remember, just as Jesus taught us, we are not the source of all power and goodness. We are not the source of all healing and hope. You are the branches, which means you are to abide, to be a part of this thing, to recognize your connection, and then strengthen that connection. Because our connection to the vine, to the source, it says, will produce fruit, more than we can ever hope for or imagine. A question for us as disciples is, how do we abide in our good shepherd? How do we abide in the source of all life and hope? This day we get another I am the vine, but we get a little extra because last time we kind of inferred we're sheep, clearly. But this time it's very clear. I am the vine. You, my followers, my people, are branches. Easy peasy. I think we get that like right off the bat. Excellent. Obviously, God is a source of life and light. Everything comes from God. All fruit that we produce, all good things have to come from our Creator. This source, this stem, this root system we have. And that's why this week we decided in this series we're talking about lifelines, about when life can get choppy, when life's waters are just overwhelming at times. Even after Easter, even after the resurrection, we need to be reminded of the things that God gives us to support us in that journey. And this is one of them, which is that we are connected. I think Ken just said it. We are not alone. We're not doing this by ourselves. We are given a connection from the very beginning. And the good news is we don't have to manufacture goodness, manufacture energy. That goodness, that energy, it comes from the source of all creation. However, I will say there are times, and you could probably relate, where I don't have a lot of energy and I don't feel particularly connected at any point. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Maybe it's the time of year, parents who have little ones or kids that are in school, you know the season we're in right now. School's wrapping up, which means recitals, plays, talent shows, this. I basically feel like I run a cool taxi service for my kids. It's great. But it's like, I'm not one who would say suffers from road rage, but sometimes it's just like, enough driving, enough. I'm done with this. I don't want to be out here anymore. And I had a moment the other day where I was absolutely tapped. Just done. You know the experience. I'd been frustrated at work, at home. I'd been failing to do what I needed to do. I'd failed at doing the things I wanted to do. It just seemed at every turn I seemed to be letting someone down, failing to live up to some promise or agreement I made. I felt bad as a pastor, as a husband, as a dad, and I will say I was just cooked. I was done. I was not feeling up to it at that time. I knew that any of those interactions that day would go poorly because I had this attitude. I've been called a Labrador by a lot of people. Tail's always wagging. But if I could use another dog metaphor, at this moment I was feeling very bitey, very prone to bite. No, I am in a bad mood. It's like my dog is lovely, except when she's chewing her bone. Don't touch her. She's busy. She wants to work on this. And I think it's a great time to point out everyone gets this way. Everyone has. Amen. Yes. A parent says this. Amen. But everyone gets this way. Everyone has seasons of this. And a bit of advice for people when you're seeing somebody who is particularly prickly or bitey, grace. I would ask for grace. I would say a good recommendation is how are we being kind to the people who are having this tough time? Because I've said it about kids, but it applies to adults too. We're not giving people a hard time. We're having a hard time, right? That's us at our worst, is when we're having a hard time with something. I describe those times as fight or flight. There's this avoidance, at least in me, in that situation. Grumpy in that bitey behavior. But it's because if I get down to it, It's this feeling of not having enough. I don't have enough patience. I don't have enough grace. I don't have enough fluency. I don't have enough energy. I just don't have enough. And that feeling then can take a really terrible turn, which I knew was possible, which is why I was like, you know what? I don't know about this. I'm feeling bitey. You start being aggressive to other people because, why are you in such a good mood when I'm not? Why are you so okay? You're clearly part of the problem. Because I wouldn't be this way if you weren't this way. Right? And then the worst thing happens. Shame then creeps in because it's really then becomes not just an ethic of, I don't have enough, there isn't enough. You start thinking, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I don't have it. I don't have what I need. I'm not made for this. And there's a word that's used in our scriptures today that I was reminded of. I think it's so appropriate. Did you guys hear a word? When we're not connected to the vine, it says that it withers. Ooh, withers. That we can wither. Where something loses some of that color, the leaves start curling because it's not getting the nutrients it needs. There's that scarcity again. I just need more. How about parents at the end of a school year? Are you feeling like you're burning your reserves, you're past your reserves, you're starting to curl at the edges? What about people who have been retired for some time? Energy levels aren't the same, right? Things are changing. You're not who you used to be. The color maybe that defined your fruits is different. What are we going to do with this? It's not what I hoped. It's not what I was in the past. How about your careers? Feeling like your careers just aren't producing fruit. They're not feeding anyone. It feels like I'm just going through the motions. I had a phone call the other day from my wife, Emily. She had one of those days where I had afternoon engagements. So she picked up both kids at two schools. Talk about road rage, man. Picked up two kids, and then she was on the schedule for dinner, putting dinner together too. So pick up the kids, feed the kids. It's a lot. It's Emily Day, and I'm at work, and I get a phone call as she's working on dinner, and she goes, I need you to call when you get a second, call the appliance repair guy. And I'm like, oh, no. The appliance, what? She's like, the fridge just isn't working. I was like, of course. Of course it's not working. It's a new fridge, of course. Of course it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. And she goes, yeah, light's not coming on. It's not cold in there. I mean, well, it's cold right now, but I don't know how long it's going to be that way. So when you get home, we're going to have to do some shuffling. And I'm like, cool. Cool thing to do at night, shuffling all your groceries around and trying to figure out what to do with them. Next day, I'm going to have to pack lunches. So, like, how's that going to work? I'm just getting mad. And I'm like, no problem. Of course. And it hits me. I'm like, wait a minute. I haven't been in this house that long. I actually don't know what breaker this one's on. Whoa. Maybe she was using like multiple appliances or something. I call her back. I text her back. Hey, have you checked the breaker? And she goes, ooh. She checks the breaker. She goes, oh, everything's working again. I go, yes. Ta-ha, repairman. You're not coming to my house. I'm not going to give you money today. I love repairmen, to be fair. Thank God for them. But it was one of those situations where there was just a convergence. There was a lot of things on that. Charging the neighbor needed our lawnmower, and we have those little batteries, and it was charging on the same thing. So she just unplugged that, and all of a sudden the breaker's fine. I'm like, well, great solution. The fridge was never broken. The plug wasn't broken either. The breaker did its job. The energy was flowing. It was just not connected. And I was thinking about that. Thinking about that power source. Our text says, abide in me as I abide in you, just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. The Greek word that's used in the New Testament a ton for abiding is meno, which means to stay, to be with. Jesus would have been largely informed by his sort of his Jewish upbringing. He would have been raised reading the Torah, and in the Hebrew Old Testament, the word would be yashab. And that definition of abiding is the same in Hebrew, except it adds to it a sort of interpersonal relationship. Abiding isn't just staying connected. Abiding is this relationship, and I immediately think of that relationship in biology, if like certain things depend on other things, and I thought about the fridge, and I go, the fridge don't exist or do its job apart from the power that it's getting, right? The fridge is a reminder that when I was at my wit's end, when we are depleted, when we are struggling, that thing that can bring us to feeling shame, that we're insufficient, we're not enough, we're inadequate, we are failing to understand our very identity, our very core, who we are. It's a complete misunderstanding of our role when we start thinking that we're inadequate, because we are called to remember, just as Jesus taught us, we are not the source of all power and goodness. We are not the source of all healing and hope. We are not the source. We are not the primary energy source. In fact, it says you are the branches, which means you are to abide, to be a part of this thing, to recognize your connection, and then strengthen that connection. Because our connection to the vine, to the source, it says, will produce fruit, more than we can ever hope for or imagine. And it's brought me to that point where I realized abiding is the point. Abiding isn't some secondary goal. In the list of all the things you got to do as a disciple, abiding is not low on that list. It's high on that list. It's like saying, the fridge is a cold box right out of the box. No. You need to plug it in first. It is not really doing what it's supposed to do apart from that source. Abiding is a critical nature. So, a question for us as disciples is, how do we abide in our Good Shepherd? How do we abide in the source of all life and hope? I have really good news for you guys. You already know. You already know how to abide. You already know what things fuel you. You know what kinds of things fill you up spiritually and hopefully. You abide every time. You guys are in worship right now. That's abiding. I would hope you're not coming here to go, I got to go to church on Sunday. I hope there's something you receive from gathering together in worship. I hope there's something you receive in terms of encouragement, comfort, healing, or hope. When you come to worship so that you can be challenged and encouraged and sent, you are abiding. You abide every time you come to this table. Every time you agree. I remember one of our theologians at seminary said, you can't say yes to this. And I said, she goes, but you can't say no. And I was like, oh, that maybe helps. You coming forward to take this meal, to receive God's provision, is abiding. Saying, I want this. I need this. I need to be strengthened by it. Not just to hear the words, but to taste and see, to experience, to receive God's provision. You abide when you pray. You abide when you remember your connection to the source. You abide when you show up, when you seek out those things that recharge and connect you to your true source. Because, again, you aren't the source. I'm not the source, which is a big part of, I'm fine now, if anyone's worried. I'm okay now, I'm not as grumpy. Got a little of what I talked about last week. I touched some grass, got a little sky time, got connected again, and there were a few prayers there too to remind myself, I'm not Jesus. I grew out of this, I'm a part of this. I fail, I struggle sometimes. I'm not meant to be the source of all healing and hope. I'm meant to abide. I'm meant to abide in what Jesus is all about. I don't need to come up with all the ways that I am insufficient and inadequate. I need to abide in God's mission and recognize we all have gifts to serve the kingdom. All of us do. All of us have those gifts. Not all the gifts, I'm sorry to say, to anybody who's really exceptional. You don't have all of them. But if we abide in what we have, connect to that source, we have more than we need. And for that reminder, brothers and sisters, we have been given this message of our true identity. The fruit produced when we remember who we are will do more than we can imagine. Thank God we don't have to manufacture energy. Thank God we don't have to manufacture goodness, because the truth is, it's already all around us. The source, the creator, who created all things from a whisper, is here. How do we connect to it? How do we remember what's true about our identity? For that reminder, for that good news that we are connected, not on our own. For the good news that we are not made to wither. I say, thanks be to God and amen.